Welcome to Wine Soundtrack South Africa. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack, this is Morena Kalo, and today I'm sitting with Michela Sfiligoi from Nomoya Wines. Welcome, Michela. Can you maybe tell me a bit more about yourself?
Hi, thank you for having me. Yes, of course. Nomoya Wines is a new venture, started in August last year, so 2021. And it is a venture in partnership with my husband and Talia Engelbrecht. We started on what we like to do and what we are good at, and now is developing in other sides, like a wine bar opened in Paarl a few days ago.
That's pretty exciting stuff. So, where is Nomoya located? Where are your wines from? All over the show, or what's the story?
Yeah, it's basically all over the show, and that's the beauty of it, because South Africa has a diversity which is amazing, and even I love the site where we have been for 17 years, which is a fantastic farm. I probably missed for all these years the beautiful spots and the unique environments and the unique people and unique stories behind other vineyards and other farms. So now we're buying grapes, and of course we need to go on site and chat to the farmers. My husband and Talia are doing sort of a consultancy on what we want on the vineyards and the grapes. So we have the chance to have this full view of South Africa, especially, of course, the Western Cape. And it gives us so much joy. Opened a new world inside the winemaking in South Africa. We're buying grapes from Stellenbosch, we're buying grapes from Swartland, from Paarl, and we're not really looking at a specific origin. We're more looking at the specific grape and the best site for that grape.
And so this is a fairly young business, as we've just heard. What is your current level of production, and do you see that increasing, or do you kind of want to stick with where you're at in terms of production volume?
We started last year with 35,000 bottles, and we're out of stock of most of it. This year we increased the production to 60,000. We have a good market in Europe, north of Europe. South African local market is more to private and some restaurants and very specialized shops. But I think it's going to increase because we got USA in the last month. So I think we're looking at sort of a production that doesn't have to be big, but as we go, we will increase some of the varieties. We found, of course, Chenin and Pinotage, which is the core wines of the portfolio in terms of South African varieties, but also we found lots of interest in the Italian varieties. So people know us as first being planted in the Vermentino in South Africa. So of course we have the experience on that, and usually it's quite good. But this year we challenged ourselves on producing a Sangiovese, a Nebbiolo, a Barbera, which is very interesting, especially for the South Africans, more than the export. So I think we will increase, and there is lots of interest. And luckily we got quite good wines out of these beautiful grapes.
It's great, and I think that's one of the positives of not owning your property, your wine property, is that it's quite scalable and you're not limited by the borders of your land. So you can actually have a lot of fun and ensure that you source your grapes from, plantings that you really feel have value. So that's really exciting stuff. So, Michela, I think our listeners can clearly tell that you don't have a typical South African accent. Where are you from? What is your history, and how did you come to end up in South Africa?
Well, my accent says I'm Italian. Sometimes they say your accent is not clearly located, but yes, me and my husband are Italians. We came to South Africa for an holiday in 2003. Basically got stuck in the country by its beauty and its people and its wines and the views and the colors. I mean, I can go on for hours. We decided to basically started something in South Africa, leaving behind our not jobs, but businesses. Attilio was consulting farmers in Italy, in the northeast of Italy. I was managing a big wine farm and a small winery, family winery. So we both coming from an agricultural and wine business background. We are very passionate, and that is, I think, the key of going through a big change, because when you come from Italy to South Africa, it's not really the same. It's different, and you need to be very humble, to listen and ask for advices, because even if you are an expert in Italy, you are not an expert in South Africa, that's for sure. So South Africa, basically, we fell in love with South Africa. We're proudly Italians, but we feel more South African citizens now than Italians. We try to use what we know about Italy and what people ask us to share in a sharing way, with wines, with food, and our experience, Attilio, especially on the agricultural side. It's great. After 18 years, he has a very deep experience in Italy, and now a deep experience here in South Africa. So you can combine the two. Same for me on the winemaking and the wine sales, and together with us, I mean, Talia, she's South African and she's young, she's 30, she's beautiful soul, passionate about agriculture and viticulturist. She follows Attilio on all his experience, because Attilio likes also going out of the basket of the vineyards on the vegetable side and other things. He will never stop. If you let him go, he will never stop to do something new and something really not, in the shape of himself. And it's beautiful how we can combine the three experience and the three cultures. And the company that comes out is a sort of a marriage of three in the business side, and we're sharing a lot, and it's very nice.
It is great to have that kind of level of engagement with people who are so passionate in one organization. Not so long ago, I visited the Wine Hive to check it out. That's the new wine bar you were referring to. And we were chatting about some of your experiences of when you arrived here in South Africa, and how it was quite challenging for you initially, that things that you kind of took for granted in Italy that were simple and straightforward just weren't here. Do you want to share some of these experiences with us, just to highlight how things are done so differently in different parts of the world?
Yeah, well, on the agricultural side, I remember one of the first trips we did. We were looking at a vineyard on a farm in Stellenbosch, and they were planting a new vineyard, and they were planting poles, and they were doing that by hand. But clearly, it was a farm that didn't have money problems. Machinery would not be an issue. So we were wondering why. In Italy, everything is done by machine, especially when you're planting. You're planting poles, you're planting vines with a machine. So it took us a few questions to ourselves, why is, working like that? We learned 4 years later that, of course, the ground and the soil here in South Africa is much older than what it is in Italy. And when you work the soil, then you can't even go with a light machine because it compacts and becomes basically cement soil. And the vines would not grow properly. So that's why this practice is done by hand here in South Africa. If you come, with no humble approach, then you think something else, which is, why they it's not understandable if somebody is not explaining to you. And then the other side of it is the culture, the different culture. So here we are a rainbow nation, and in the rainbow nation you have the different colors, and the colors needs to be understood. If you don't put away your word, you would not understand the people you are working with, and that's very important here. So it takes you a while, and there's many examples of, I had a few workers that gave me nice days in terms of wondering if they were finding an excuse or it was their culture. So luckily I had the previous owner of the farm. She was my advisor, so she was on the phone with me a lot, especially at the beginning. So it is important for whoever invests in South Africa to rely with somebody locally that understands what's going on in the soils, in the climate, in the culture, in the people.
I think that's one of the things that certainly makes our country very, very unique and different to so many of the other wine-producing regions around the world. And a little bit of fun trivia. Michela was referring to the soils being so much older. Our soils date back some 500 million years. So it really is fact. And I think for myself, that is part of the reason why our wines and our terroir is so diverse. And you really get such different kind of wine styles, mainly due to these old soils that are across our wine growing area. So Michela, obviously growing up in Italy, wine is 100% part of your culture, but do you have a specific memory that kind of your first experience with wine, or a standout moment where you thought, wow, this is really something that I feel I want to get more involved with or closer with?
Well, my dreams when I was a kid was to be either an auditor or a lawyer. So no wine involved, even if I was born in a barrel, because my parents had this little winery in the Collio area, which is very famous for white wines. So when I was 18, our winemaker had a little car accident, but he couldn't do harvest. So my father asked me to help. And of course, when Papa calls, you need to be there. The first grape we were harvesting at the winery was the Pinot Bianco, the Pinot Blanc. So we harvested, we crushed, we pressed, and we stored the must in the tank to chill down and then, clean up. So the day after, I went to check the tank, and I lift the lid of the tank, and this big basket of green apples just surrounded me and overwhelmed me, and it was like, I couldn't speak or think for a few minutes because it was so big. And I fell in love with wine at that moment. So I decided that auditor would not do, a lawyer would not do, but winemaking, yes. So I started evenings, so got, into the wine business fully. And when we came to South Africa, it was sort of the same falling in love with the Chenin. Chenin is another grape for me that can give you a lot. And going back to the Pinot Bianco, this year I've been especially privileged to find 4 rows of Pinot Bianco in the Voorpaardenberg. So we managed to, 34 years later, to make another Pinot Bianco. And the day after we pressed, I was crying because it took me back to that memory of 34 years ago. We're releasing the wine in August this year. It's a fresh but rich and complex Pinot Bianco. We made only 700 liters, so it's a very small batch. But it is something very special, especially because it comes from a farm of I call him the kindest farmer that I know here in South Africa. He is really a great human being and a fantastic farmer in the Voorpaardenberg. So that's my little story on the best moment in winemaking.
That's really a really lovely story. And I must say, when you were talking about the opening the lid and being overwhelmed by the flavor or the aromas of green apples, I actually got goosebumps all over. It's so cool. Continuing to speak about Nomoya wines, what is the most expensive bottle of Nomoya wine? What is it? What's behind it?
Well, the flagship of Nomoya is the Vermentino. Vermentino is our pride because we decided in 2005-06 that we wanted an Italian variety on the farm that we owned. And looking at the varieties already here in South Africa, we couldn't find one that was fitting the Paardenberg area. Climate, soils was a bit difficult. So me and my husband met through a common friend who was an expert in clones, on selecting clones in Italy, Augusto. And we called him, he came to South Africa to have an idea of what we were looking at. And he suggested the Vermentino from Sardinia, from Gallura, which is a small area in Sardinia. But if you look at the soils, they are granite, sandy soils. It's hot and windy, doesn't rain in summer, harvest time, and it's close to the sea, to the Tyrrhenian Sea. So we were looking at that, and basically the farm was having sandy granite soil with some clay, and hot and windy, of course, and getting a breeze from the ocean every afternoon. So the conditions were there. When you bring a new variety here to South Africa, of course, you need to go through all the checks and virus-free tests, and takes a bit of time. Officially on the papers, there's 2 years quarantine for 6 buds allowed. But it becomes 3 years because, of course, the seasons are the other way around. And then after 3 years, we got the go-ahead from the Department of Agriculture, so we could propagate. So it took us another 3 years, and 2014, finally, we could plant the first hectare. The training system of the vineyards is also important. So there we were looking at double Guyot. Which is quite new or not so used here in South Africa. So we did, we're very proud of what we achieved with this grape, because if I look at Savi's records now, there is almost 30 hectares of Vermentino planted in South Africa, and being the first one planted in 2014, 8 years later, it's not so bad. The Vermentino is a great grape and a great vine, because we planted in 2014. After that, if you remember, we had these 4 or 5 years of drought, and being the vineyard very young, we were afraid of losing some of them. Instead, it was, we didn't lose one vine. It is very productive, very generous. You need to get the training system of the of the vineyard right, because otherwise you get a lot and not in balance. But the beauty of this grape is that it's a fruit salad. It doesn't have a major component to refer to a fruit or a flower in particular. So it's a wine that Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Chenin lovers love. It is like Chenin. You can do from very light, easy drinking style to bubbly to very rich and complex to dessert wine. So it is for us a fantastic grape for South Africa. And of course, we're always going to be producing Vermentino, buying grapes, and we will try to find grapes in different spots in the Western Cape just to see how the wine performs in different areas.
Fantastic. It's certainly an interesting variety to work with, and I think looking at, as you said, the drought that it totally survived and did fairly well throughout. I think that's really where the future is, drought-resistant varieties, certainly here in South Africa, as in many other parts of the world. Tell me, what is your opinion on wine critics, wine competition and wine scores? Do you think there's value in that?
Well, there is always a value on everyone that talks about wine and tries to get the message out on the quality and more in what they like, because sometimes we get scores that are more reliable to personal taste or whoever is tasting. I don't have too many. They're very expensive, competition especially. So if I need to criticize something, is the cost of it. But surely there are a few which are very important, and you need to sort of understand where you positioning yourself and your wines, so it's giving you more a guideline on where you are. If I look at the market, I don't believe in all the stickers in the bottles. I think it's confusing the consumers, especially when there are too many. I believe more in a sort of, what I like of the competition, the Absa Top 10, for example, if I can make a name. They're very good at what they do. They don't give it's 10, and those 10 are also promoted from their side, and that's very important, because it gives you a neutral position, and you're working together, so you get in there very nicely. Other competitions are also good. Wine writers here in South Africa, we have too little. So we should look at, having more. Outside the country writers, they don't give the right attention to South Africa. If we take out Tim Atkins, and some others, we should probably get more journalists to visit and understand South Africa in a proper way and talk about South Africa in a proper way. So this is what I can say.
Yeah, I must agree with you, certainly on the point of not having enough wine writers here in South Africa. It really is almost a dying breed. We have some fantastic wine writers, but it would be great for there to be more. I think the real challenge with that is there's just not enough interest by the South African consumer to really read up on something as niche as wine. But hopefully that is changing slowly but surely. So, getting down to wine again, as a consumer, what do you enjoy drinking? White, red, bubbly? What tickles your fancy?
Oh, well, I have lots of favorites, especially now, because at the Wine Hive I have the chance, to taste so many wines, and I discovered that I don't have a favorite it comes down to a period where you are red or you are white or you're feeling like, light. But now we need to sit down, me and Talia and Attilio, to taste the wines and decide which ones will come to the wine eye for this month. And it's amazing. I mean, South Africa is producing so many fantastic wines and the stories behind that. In Italy we have these big farms and owned by the same family for centuries. So it's nice to see that the family continues and blah blah blah. But here we have many that are new, and the stories behind. I need to tell this one. There is a Pinot Noir made in Yemelanada, and it's a love story. It's a love story, a beautiful wine, but it's a love story. A young man comes from Friuli, our area, northeast of Italy, meets a South African girl here, they get married, she moves to Friuli, they make wine there because he has the farm there, but every year they come to South Africa to make one wine together here in South Africa. And it's a fantastic wine. I mean, it's not just a nice story, it's a beautiful wine. And at the wine hive, I'm discovering lots of them. Italians brought to South Africa, left here by the government because it didn't work and they only spoke Italian. They readjust their life. The daughter is a winemaker now and she does 3 wines on her own. So I don't have a favorite. I'm sorry.
You don't need to have a favorite. I think it's something that, for me, it depends on the weather, it depends on my mood, it depends on the company and the food. It's something that is so constantly changing and evolving that, as long as I've got something in my glass, I think that's the most important thing. You just want to have something to drink. So I know you and Attilio, you're into food and you love good quality food. I think it's something that we appreciate here in South Africa, but it certainly is very much part of your Italian heritage. When it comes to pairing food and wine, do you think there's a recipe or how would you suggest anyone would go about pairing food with wine?
Well, Italian cuisine is a very simple cuisine. So for Italians, it's quite sort of simple to pair food and wine because the ingredients that you use are never overwhelming or too powerful. So for us, it's more a matter of matching the basic ingredient to the wine. So we don't use artichokes for all the wines, for example, because technically it's only the Vermentino that doesn't get the metal taste if you eat artichokes and drink wine. Pairing is you need to look at how fat the food is, and then you need acidic wines to go with it. Or if it is sort of light, then most of the wines will go with it. But you need to look for the most important ingredient of the food that highlights the wine, and the wine highlights that main ingredient. So that's what we trying to do, and that's what we are trying to do at the Wine Hive, sort of giving simple food to pair with the wines, so the wine is always showing, and actually sometimes showing the best with the food.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. There isn't a hard and fast rule, but certainly there are a few guidelines that you can look to if you're inexperienced in wine and food pairing. So, a spaceship lands in Paarl, in that little courtyard at the Wine Hive. And these aliens depart their spaceship and they're really, really thirsty. What would you give them to drink?
Well, I would start with the Prosecco. Then I would go on with some Chenin, and then, I would go with some Vermentino, and then I would tempt then with some Cinza, and then some Pinotage, and I would end up with a Ripassa from Veneto, which is a baby Amarone.
They're going to be so drunk by the time they're done there. I don't know if that UFO will find its way back to their planet, wherever they're from. That sounds great. I want to join them, though. So, when you're not working, what do you do in your free time?
Well, besides fighting with my teenager son, no, he's a great boy, so I don't have to do that. Well, my husband is, a passionate reader and a passionate mushroom hunter and all that. I am more in the artistic side of it, and I do, things with my hands, and the strangest things that you can think. And it's a period thing. It's not always. I've been into soap making because we planted some olive trees in 2007, and 2012 when we started a little production, nobody seemed interested to it. So we had lots of leftover, and even if Italians are using lots of olive oil, we couldn't use it all. So after 2 years, it expires, you can't sell it. So I had a few containers of olive oil, and the Italian concept is not to throw away anything. So I have the house full of containers of all sorts, bottles of all sorts, because that's very Italian. So I started soap making, and I got very artistic on it. Different shapes, different colors. Otherwise, I build things, little cabinets, or I paint furniture, or my husband was always complaining. Every 6 months, the house was changing, So I do that just to clear my mind. I like manual work. Yeah. Takes me out of thinking, and
certainly very industrious by the sound of it. So that's good. It's a very good skill to have, I can tell you. Tell me, music. Are you into music? Do you have a specific genre that you enjoy? A music artist, a band?
Oh well, I'm very much into Ed Sheeran in this, but I like all sorts of music. It's not. We have me and Talia. We have a common playlist on in the car. We get every sort of important period of the year. We get a soundtrack for Nomoya. So now we are into. I am on that one, too good on saying goodbyes. But, Italian music, pop music, classical music, depends on the mood, on the weather, driving long trips or small trips, depends.
Yeah. And tell me, when movies, are you into movies? Any favorites, all-time favorites that you like to go back to now and then?
Oh, one of my favorites was Out of Africa, of course. Robert Redford and Meryl Streep in Africa. Probably that made me decide to move to South Africa also. I was very disappointed with the last 007. That was, for me, I was so excited on the flight to Düsseldorf to Provine. I could watch the movie, and at the end I was so disappointed. I don't have a favorite actor. It's more, there is many actors that are fantastically performing and not only beautiful on the screen. I'm into now Italian crime series, to be honest. So before sleeping, I watch a little episode of that. Which is quite interesting because I do this series, about crime, which are real stories, and keeps me connected to Italy. And one of the reasons why I came to South Africa, because we are complaining about lots of troubles here in South Africa, but we should actually look at our country in a more positive way.
I'll agree with that. I think we've got so many positives here in South Africa, and each country around the world has its own challenges that they face. Nowhere is perfect, unfortunately, I think we need to cut ourselves a little bit of slack, that's for sure. What would you say is the best piece of advice you've ever received, or if you were to give someone a piece of advice, a little bit of a life, something to live by, what would that be? I've been lucky because I've had many mentors, and it's not something that everybody is privileged with. But the common suggestion or advice was to be humble. If you're humble and you are passionate, then you get your knowledge increased, and your professionalism and your performance will always be better and better. So if I look at a young generation now, I'm missing that. A little bit of humble behavior. Because Google doesn't teach you everything. And you need to listen to the old people. And to listen, you need to be humble. Which doesn't mean underestimate yourself, but ask questions when someone is, giving you a piece of advice or telling you a story. And stories from old people, I learn now that I'm getting to that age, are helping your life, and you don't know when. And the thing about history repeating itself as well is, that kind of, there's a reason why it happens over and over again, and it's all about how you deal with it when it does repeat itself. So, okay. What sort of wines do you think will be drunk in, say, 500 years' time? So we know the wine industry is many, many, many years old, thousands of years old. But how do you think the face of winemaking and the styles of wine will maybe change in, say, 500 years' time?
Oh, that's a big question. I don't know if I can answer that. I know that wine is going, taste is going on sort of circles or cycles. Now we are in a phase where the reds need to be sort of easier, not lifestyle, but more easy drinking, not this big, powerful, jammy reds. I think in the future, local grapes will have a big, they have already, but local grapes, they will have a big impact, because we need to look at the diversity of the areas and the climate to have a vineyard that survives long, because I truly believe that we should manage the vineyards to keep them living for a long time, because the results we have from vines that are 35 years and older, it's completely different from a young vineyard, even 10, 12 years. 500 years is a long time. I mean, so I've no idea, to be honest with you. But I think quality-wise, we will be on top, because right now it's very difficult to find a bad wine. So good wines for sure.
Good wines is what I like to hear. I think, I certainly think it can only get better. We've got all of these amazing techniques and information and scientific guidance that we can use nowadays that really can just ensure that the quality is better and better and better. So I'd love to get into a time machine and travel 500 years and taste what they're tasting, what they'd be drinking then. Name 3 wines you would take with you to a deserted island.
Well, Vermentino cannot be missed. Then I would take for sure a Chenin and for sure a Pinotage.
I like that combo. Very, very cool. Is there a winemaking area anywhere in the world that you would really like to explore and learn more about?
Well, I don't know much about Spain. So Spain is a country that I visited, but not in a wine side of it. So that I would like to, yes.
Okay. So we're almost done. But before we're done, I'd like to play a little game with you.
Okay.
So I'm going to pick some different wine varieties,
Yes.
and you are going to tell me which song or artist you would pair that variety with.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Yes. So we have to pair Vermentino with something.
Bon Jovi.
That was easy.
Yeah, that was easy.
And then I think it would make sense to pair Pinot Bianco with something.
Yeah, that would go with Andrea Bocelli.
So smooth. And lastly, it would make very perfect sense to have some Pinotage with...
Pinotage needs Ed Sheeran and Andrea Bocelli together.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. Michela, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really awesome speaking to you. Would you like to remind our listeners where they can find you online, social media, and of course when they visit South Africa?
Well, they can find us on www.nomoyaworld.com and Nomoya Wines on Facebook and Instagram. But if they come into South Africa, they can find us in Paarl, in Main Road, at the Wine Hive. And social media is the Wine Hive.
Thank you so much, Michela. It was lovely chatting to you.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack South Africa. For details and updates, visit our website winesoundtrack.com.